Hello everyone and welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be doing something, or talking about something a little bit different today. Now what we're doing today is kind of something I touched on in another video in the past. So what I'm doing today is I'm going to be rechecking on the weird steaming, maybe geothermal anomaly that's been going on here for a little while now. Now for those of you that are new or don't know, it was back in 2016. I came here and could smell some sulfur gases and stuff, and I thought that was a little unusual, so I checked out the area, and eventually a couple months later I realized that it seemed to be coming from the ground. Fast forward into December of 2016, I noticed some noticeable steaming come out of some large openings and smaller openings from the ground, along with some weird smelling gases. Then shortly after, the steaming stopped, and then there was even some heat. And eventually the heat died down, and then it just seemed to kind of die. Shortly after, in the summer of 17, I noticed it again, but it wasn't that strong. And then that following winter, there was no steaming, and the heat was pretty low, and there wasn't really anything going on. And then the summer of 18, it was just mostly inactive, and there was nothing really occurring. So now I'm back out here to see if there's anything else going on. And I've already checked on this about a couple months ago, and there was some things going on, but it's just barely active. And before that, it was completely dead. And about 2 months ago, I came out here, and it seemed to be reviving itself. And it's just a little strange, so I'll just get right to it and show you guys. Now, back in the winter of 16 and 17, I noticed there was a couple little tiny little areas up on this slope here where I could smell and see a little bit of steaming, not much. And then ever since then, there's been nothing here. Now, speaking of the steaming, in the winter of 16 and 17, I actually got a little bit of video footage, along with a couple of thermal images and some other pictures of the activity. And if any of you are interested in checking it out, I might post the video to YouTube here soon. And if I do, it should pop up right about here. And if I remember, I'll put it into the description when I post it. I'm currently in a snowstorm, and it's going to get worse as the day goes on. It's supposed to snow all day tomorrow, so it's wonderful weather out today. Alright, so there used to be an opening here, and it collapsed a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago. And it too used to be venting some steam and stuff. And in the snow there's a little random hole. And could be related, who knows, but we'll move on. Alright, well, here's the largest one by far. If you look up right there, you see that? Some frost going on there. Now, it usually happens when they're doing something, but I'm not noticing too much right now. Well, actually, I am smelling some gases, which is typical. Oh yeah, they're active again. They're back at it. So you got the large opening there, and then you got the smaller one that's right below it. Probably connected. Alright, so here's the vent. I brought along my little thermal camera. Okay. Now, as you can see, there is some heat coming out of the vent there. The brighter colors are the warmer spots. And you can see that. It's hard to see. There's definitely some heat coming out of there. Now, you might notice the temperature up there in the Fahrenheit. Now, this doesn't record air temperature, it records surface temperature. So whatever the surface of the rock is what it's reading. But it's obviously much warmer than the surrounding rock. And if I was to look over here, you can see it's darker, 27 degrees. So I did record air temperature. I stuck a little thermometer down in there to record the air, and it came up to about 68 degrees Fahrenheit, so much warmer. And the weather outside was 23 degrees, so it was pretty cold out that day. Alright, there's another area where heat and gases like to come up out. If you look in there, right in there, you see the frost build up on the rock right there? That's a usual sign that there's some warmth or moisture in the air, and it's collecting on the rock surface there. Usually, if they're strong enough and the snow is high enough, right here you'll get a very large cone, and you can kind of see it a little bit, but it's warm enough to keep the snow melted. And one year is a pretty tall little cone. It was like its own little mini snow volcano thing going on. Alright, and the thermal, again, this is only surface temperature, not air temperature. So, some warmth. Then you got little things like this. It's just a random line in the snow. You got some rock on the thermal. See that? How it lights up? Get a little closer. Kind of see it just a little bit in there. Alright, so for those of you... Oh, hold on a second. Camera's freezing up. Anyways, for those of you who've seen my past video, you probably remember this one here. This deep fracture that goes way back in there. And I can't actually see the bottom. I tried sticking a wire camera in there once and didn't have much success. I got it stuck a couple times, but eventually I'll try it again. But anyways, you can see there's some frost building right up at the top. And there's some moisture coming out of it. And then when I put the thermal to it, you see that? Yeah, definitely got some heat coming out of there. And some gases, of course. That goes way down in there. And it's kind of jagged inside, but if I was to get it just right, it usually tends to get a really bright spot about center. Alright, so here's another interesting spot. Right against this rock here. And you can see there's some exposed dirt there. And you might think it's because of the rock up here might be shielding a little bit, but the stuff I'm standing on top of, it didn't do much to shield it. And when you put the thermal to it, you can see there's some warm spots going on right there. And usually, if it's really warm, you'll get some major frost buildup on the ground and such. And right there you have that heated ground area, and then just right over here you have this little hole with that nice little heat signature. And again, this is recording the snow temperature and not the air temperature. Now, my first initial reaction, of course, is when you see heat and you smell gases and you see eventually vapors coming up out of the ground, your first initial thought is some kind of geothermal heat source. But there is maybe a couple other things it could be. So I've been in contact with several people discussing it, and the reason why I'm kind of hesitant to say it's geothermal activity is because of the location here. Now, this area around here isn't really known for geothermal activity at all, and that actually there isn't. The nearest hot spring or any geothermal I can think of is several miles away from here. So this area is supposed to be absent of geothermal activity. So this is why I don't want to just jump out and say that's geothermal activity. I want to investigate and see if there's any other explanation for it. So idea number one has to do with the lake here. Now, the venting where the gases and steam are coming out are pretty close to the lake here. So one idea, and this explains the gases, is that rotting material from the lake is somehow making it into the bedrock, and the gases from whatever is decomposing from the lake is rising up, and that's what I'm smelling as the gases. Now, there's a couple of problems with this theory, and one of them, it doesn't really explain the heat, it only explains the gas part of it. So where's the heat coming from? And the other thing is, I talked to a geologist about this idea that the rotting material is entering the bedrock and then the gases are rising to the surface, and he pretty much ruled that theory out. So that theory is no longer, I'm not really considering that anymore. Alright, so theory number two is explaining the possible source of the heat. So due to the fractures in the bedrock and due to the lake draining and maybe water entering the fractures in the bedrock, due to the way the layers of the rock are positioned, one theory was that since the lake drains every year, as the water level drops during the summer, the theory is that as the lake level drops, it's sucking in warm, hot air from the summer down into the ground through the fractures of the bedrock, because the water table supposedly is in that bedrock, and as the lake drops, the water in the bedrock drops as well, sucking all the warm air into the ground. And then when winter comes along, like right now, water level rises and pushes all that hot air right back out. Okay, the problem with this theory is you're explaining the heat, but not really the gases anymore. And the other thing is, if that was the case, if that's what was controlling the heat, is the lake, then every single winter when the lake level rises, you should see the steaming and the heat release coming up out of the ground. But that wasn't the case. So in 2016, it was really strong. 17, pretty much dead. It didn't compare anything to 16, and nothing has compared to 2016. I have yet to see it return to that level. It was crazy that year. I mean, nothing like Yellowstone. It was only 6 to 8 degrees. So every year, as the lake goes up and down, you should see the steaming and the gassing have the same results. As the lake goes down, it kind of dies down, and as the lake comes back up, it pushes all that hot air out. Well, last winter came along and nothing was really happening. So if that was the idea of the lake water rising theory, then it should be consistent with the steaming, and it's not. And the other thing is, the lake doesn't really rise during the winter. It's been pretty much stable all winter. It only really rises in the spring when all the snow melts and it enters the lake. So okay, so setting all the other theories aside, let's just assume maybe that it is geothermal activity. So what would explain it, since this area is completely absent of it? Well, for there to be any kind of geothermal activity, you have to have heat that makes it to the surface in the form of like a hot spring, gases, and so on. Now, one way that stuff makes it to the surface is through fractures and usually faults. So maybe about 2 or 3 miles that way into the mountains, there are 2 strike slip faults, left lateral, and then another fault that they don't know what kind it is. It's probably another strike slip, but there's some faulting going on over there. And then nearby, pretty much right next to the venting area, appears to be a small geologically young fault that I showed, I believe, in a past video. Usually you find hot springs and geothermal activity in active tectonic areas. 2015, not too far away from here, we had a pretty decent seismic event. I felt 2 earthquakes. It kind of shook up, well, it didn't really shake up everything. They were only, I think the biggest one was a 3.9, so that's nothing, but for around here, for all the people that are not used to earthquakes, it was quite a big event. But that was earthquake activity that happened a ways from here. Now, in 2003, 2007, 2009, and 2016, there were earthquakes that happened within a mile, or just over a mile or 2 from where I am now. And one earthquake is in 2007 actually occurred at the bottom of the lake, about 2 kilometers below the lake. And then in 2009, there was one just north of here, maybe not even a mile, that happened, and that was at a depth of about 9 kilometers. And then in 2016, we had some in the mountains back there, in between those 2 strike slip faults, and that was about a depth of 7-something kilometers. So, oh, and then the 2003 one was just south of me, in the mountains. And I've checked a couple different websites, and they have different depth markers on that earthquake, but it seems to be around 13 kilometers in depth. Alright, so back to the idea of it being possibly geothermal activity. So we have faults, minor seismic activity in the area. So that kind of adds up a little bit. The other thing is what is the heat source? Now, there's a couple of different heat sources that can cause thermal activity, like magma, which I highly, highly doubt for this location. And then the more common thing is the primal heat from the earth, just the natural heat. So as the water goes down into the earth, gets hot, heats up, finds a fault. Due to its high heat and pressure, it comes back to the surface as a hot spring. But not in this case. Here, it's pretty low thermal activity. So can't really prove that is geothermal activity, but the biggest piece of evidence is not even a mile from here. In 1977, they were doing some kind of well. They dug a well down to about 500 something feet where the aquifer is. And they measured the water temperature. Now the water temperature, average temperature for our aquifer, is about 42, 43, 45, 47 degrees Fahrenheit. So around there, it kind of fluctuates, but about 47 degrees is about the norm for our aquifer temperature. Now, in 1977, they got about over 500 feet down, and the water temperature was 20 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, that seems like a pretty large difference to me. The water was 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and the average is 47. And that is not very far from here at all, so that pretty much tells me if you got that warm of water in the aquifer, and then over there you have that steaming, that there really could probably be something going on below. Well, that is the weird venting that's going on. It could be geothermal activity, and it could be something else. If you guys have any ideas, let me know in the comments, and I think this will do it for today. Oh, and again, I should be posting that past footage from 2016 of the steaming. A lot of you will probably find that very interesting. You can actually see it very vividly coming up out of the ground. And I'll also probably put some thermal images as well. And that should be up soon after I get this one posted. So hopefully I'll have that one put online as soon as possible. But anyways, this will do it for today. I got a little bit of a walk back to my car, and I want to get home before the roads get bad. But anyways, hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time. Take care.